All right, awesome. Well, yeah. So first of all, yeah, thank you for the presentation. I thought it was really good. Really, I think it had a lot of intuitive kind of appeal as well. But I just wanted to comment on something Scott had just mentioned, which is that that the defeater is basically that supernatural claims have either been shown to be false or unfalsifiable. And I think in some ways he's getting at the fact that there seems to be lack of evidence. I mean, at least that's how I would put it. Is there seems to be lack of evidence for the supernatural. So the defeater would be that there isn't good evidence for the supernatural. Now that would be obviously like a an undercutting defeater. But are you saying that there needs to be like a rebutting defeater? Like are we making that distinct? Is there a distinction there?
Well, I'm saying the experience itself is evidence. So, this is where it comes down to phenomenological conservatism in terms of I and most people feel like we can sense this being and because in general it's hard to falsify sense experience unless you have like a particular specific thing that can be falsified. I can't falsify my experience of the external world. It would be hard for that's not a good example. Never mind. But point is, like, experience itself is evidence. All evidence is technically experiential, and so when you have this kind of experience, you would need to look for a defeater in order. Like the null hypothesis is that it's reliable unless you have reason to think otherwise. So, particular specific supernatural claims could be falsified. I mean, it depends on what it is, but like, yeah, a medium talking to the dead, faith healer, something like that, you could falsify those in theory. The ones I'm talking about, where it's more of this experiential thing, this is where you would have to go to an evolutionary, I think, argument for that. So if you were able to show that this was a malfunction in sense perception and that this is like a mutation gone wrong and we're seeing things that aren't there and that evolution's corrected it to where we now know it's false, I think that would be a potential defeater. It wouldn't disprove God, obviously, but it would be a defeater for this had the hyperactive agency detection. And I'm trying to argue that I think the argument I gave is meant to be more of a defeater for religious non-experience. So people who say, well, I don't feel like there's a God. Am I warranted to believe that? Yes, you would be warranted to believe that if you just had that and didn't know anyone who ever claimed that. Yeah, I think you would be. But the point is, when I'm saying, well, look, here's how evolution, broadly speaking, works. Here's how we'd expect it self-correct. We don't observe that. So people who don't have this religious experience should that almost would act as a defeater towards them in that way. So I know I'm kind of speaking in circles here, but short version: specific supernatural claims, generally speaking, could be falsified. When it comes to sense perception of the supernatural, that is itself evidence, and that itself would require some kind of um, evolutionary debunking argument, I think, to really falsify that.
Got it. Yeah, that definitely clears up that question. And I had one other one as well, that you say in your, I think you said in the argument for phenomenological conservatism that if something appears to be one way, we should presume it to be that way unless given good
Yes.
evidence or given good reasons to the contrary.
Yes.
Um, this seems like it's not meant to be a trick question or anything like that, but it's almost like I want to say like what percent of the world needs to believe the same thing in order to make it, more likely to be true. That is like when does it rise to the level of appears to be that way? Like what do you mean by that term, I guess,
Yeah,
phrase?
that's a good question. I don't think there's any particular mathematical number I could put on it. But this kind of goes back to the stuff I was saying, like in infants, for example, when it's this intuition in terms of like a belief that we're born with, that we can biologically show is something that we intuitively default kind of believe, that kind of thing, is what I more meant in terms of it seems to me. And that's the foundation for belief in superstition and religion and all that. That's more what I was referring to. And so, yeah, I don't know how high. I would say that if religious belief was very uncommon and it was like, I don't know, seven, let's say it was 7% of the population, which is about, I think, the percentage of the world that's atheist. It's close to 15% that's non-religious, but about half of those still believe in like God or something. So saying about 7%, give or take, of people in theory, if we're saying 7% of people were believed in God and 93% of people, give or take, were naturalists or didn't believe in the supernatural or something like that. I think that then we would seriously have to look at, okay, is this just a neutral mutation? Is this a harmful mutation? Is the belief in naturalism a beneficial mutation that's more likely to be accurate? If that was the case, then I think we
Mm-hmm.
would have pretty good reasons to say, well, maybe religious belief, at least the experiences we get from it, maybe those are probably like a genetic malfunction that evolution is like a remnant of or something. I think that would be a good argument. Still wouldn't disprove the existence of God, because you could make other philosophical arguments, but just the idea of experience, I think that would be a pretty good argument. It would be definitely be an argument in the atheist's favor, I would say, if that
Got
were the
it.
case.
Yeah.
In a world God makes, I'd expect, if God wants most people to know him and come to him, I'd expect him to give like at least a template. And obviously he's not as obvious to everyone, doesn't give specifics, but um, there'd at least be like a template for people to work on. So as I said earlier, I think a world in which I could easily conceive of a world where evolution could have evolved us to be completely secular, where we wouldn't, or at least most of us wouldn't believe in God, or at least we wouldn't believe in like these kind of agents, and wouldn't be an important part of our lives. And if that was the case, I think that's more expected under naturalism. It's not that you can't have religious belief under naturalism, but if that was the world we lived in, I think that would be a lot worse for the theist. Whereas a world in which most people have this inclination, I think is better predicted under theism. So
And
Mm.
just to clarify your position, Caleb, what you're saying is that for the individual who says that they have this experience, it seems to them that there is this transcendent being. That for them it's not a numbers game; it's they're justified on the basis of their experience. But for those who lack that experience, that they might have either an undermining or overriding defeater. They have a defeater in the fact that there are so many other people who report having experienced it, and then I guess the degree to which that's a strong defeater would be the degree to which the percentage is high of other people who experience it. Is that a fair
yes,
summary?
that would be the plurality of contrary testimony could be a defeater for itself. If you're in a room with 99 people and one person's like, "Oh, I think I see a giraffe," and no one else can see it, it's more likely that the guy's just mistaken or lying or something than it is that he's right and everyone else is wrong. Like, just, I mean, you can't always do it by head counting, but I think that's a general. I would think he's on LSD or something. I don't know. But
All
if
right.
99 people can see a giraffe and one person can't, I'd assume either he has vision problems, or I don't know, isn't very attentive or something. Who knows? But so yeah, you can't just count numbers, but I think that could act as sort of a defeater. Again, it's like the blind man example. If you were born blind, never, I don't know how you survived, but let's just say you did, and never interacted with another person in your life. You're just born on an island and managed to survive, and you just didn't know that light was a thing. I think you'd be perfectly rational to think that. But if you run into people and everyone else claims they can see and they can demonstrate, they can do things that you can't, and like predict where, do, like, wow, this is really crazy. That would be a defeater for you. I think the fact that other people can demonstrably like show that they have these experiences that you don't have, and it's like, oh, that's something. So yeah, I think in that case, the blind person would have a defeater for his initial belief that light doesn't exist.
Thank you for listening. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe. Please also look at the show notes in order to find a link to our group so that you can join our next discussion. I look forward to chatting with you.